Countdown.
Welcome to the People Strategy Forum podcast. We're a show that guides leaders on how to elevate the workforce. We believe that people are at the heart of successful organizations, and a team members' well being, their rewards, career development, it's all essential to a happy and healthy and highly productive workforce overall. So, this show discusses the practical and effective leadership strategies for top executives, senior professionals, and talent managers. So first, I would love to introduce you to our a group of our hosts today. We have a full house, and first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Howard Niswitz. He's a senior compensation professional advisor and also a strategic HR consultant for over 30 years. So we're glad to have him here. And also on the show today, we have Sumit Singla. He's an experienced HR consultant. He is broadcasting out of India today. He helps companies across the globe, and usually those small to medium-sized enterprises, to helping them scale globally and with cutting-edge practices and solutions. And then also we have today Shar Miller, and she is a strategy skills consultant at the Strategic Thinking Institute. She's also a talent management strategist and career and entrepreneur transformation coach. So she helps a lot of you out there that are entrepreneurs and are looking at improving your career and getting started as an entrepreneur. Shar knows it all. She's done it. And so she's a great resource there. I myself, my name is Sam Reeve. I'm the founder of Comp Team. I'm a global expert in compensation and talent management strategies. And so you're here to bring the People Strategy Forum to you today. I do have a very, very special guest today. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Justin Jones-Fosu, the inspiring founder and CEO of Work Meaningful. So Justin is not only a dynamic business speaker, and he speaks everywhere around the world. We'll talk about that in a minute. But he's an author and a passionate social entrepreneur and researcher dedicated to creating meaningful work environments. He speaks extensively across the globe, as I mentioned. And so we're glad to have him here today. In our discussion, we're going to be talking about his new book titled I Respectfully Disagree. It came out about 4 months ago. And it kind of dives into how to have those difficult conversations in a divided world. So Justin is going to share his expertise on navigating challenges and how to have those meaningful dialogues between people and those difficult topics. So he is known for his humor and impactful insights. Anybody that's been to one of Justin's events leaves feeling engaged and ready to make a difference in the world. So join us as we explore practical strategies for bridging divides and fostering an understanding in personal setting, in a professional setting, in a personal setting, whether you're at work or at home. So welcome, Justin. It's so wonderful to have you here today.
I am super pumped to be here with y'all. Y'all have no idea. The smile and joy that's radiating is awesome.
So Justin, I mean, just if you could just tell us for those people that are joining and don't know your background, just how did you get into this business and becoming such a huge magnet for people that are willing to make a change in their lives and also in their businesses, and then just the inspiration that you just put out in your events and your talks.
Yeah, so I mean, like most things, I got it from my mother. My mom is a psychologist, and one of the things that she taught me early on, it's a lot of different lessons. Now, she was one of the first Black female air traffic controllers in the Air Force, and I remember she would take us to events that we disagreed with. She would take us to events that we didn't know a lot about. And she really was teaching us this aspect of how do we consistently learn, and not just learn about ideas and theories, but how do we learn about people and the humanity of people. And so that really became my quest for just empowering and impacting people in really meaningful ways. And so with our company Work Meaningful, we're going on about 18 years. And it's been a fun ride. And we've had different iterations, and we've really just settled in this place of at this intersection of meaningful work and inclusion. and that place has been really, really powerful for us. And so that's kind of led us to a lot of different companies, from Fortune 50 to fortunate fourth graders who are having a great time spelling their name. And so love what I do, very passionate about it. But that was kind of like the underpinnings. And so I'm a former HR professional, worked for a top financial firm, and then worked in education for one of the top universities in the country, and really just found ways of really leaving people better than I found them. And I challenged myself to do that as a leader and a manager, and now as a company that's in 2 continents, both here and in Ghana. Really excited about that. So yeah.
Well, I bet having a parent in the military, did you travel a lot, or get experience to a lot of different cultures?
Yeah, so I was kind of like post mom being in the Air Force. I remember good boat and bad boat. We went to Alaska once,
Yeah.
but I was really little. But while we didn't travel quite a bit after she got out, I do remember my mom brought the world to us. And so
Hmm.
we traveled the world in our own little place. And so we went to Oktoberfest and Polish festivals and Hispanic Heritage Month events. And we had exchange students from France and Japan and Germany and even Brazil. And so I realized, like, my mom was, even though we couldn't afford to travel, and the way that the military probably afforded her, we traveled locally, and she traveled the world with books and ideas and even people.
I know that you're a proud father of four, and I know you cherish that responsibility. How are you
Yeah.
bringing this new concept of work meaningful in not only to their lives but into everyone else's as well?
Yeah, so I went from 2 to 4. It wasn't
Yeah,
twins. I recently got married, which has been a great a blessing. And so
congrats.
I'm challenging the same lessons. Thank you. The same lessons that I teach, just at Toyota at their headquarters, and same lessons I was teaching them, I'm teaching my kids, right?
Hmm.
About things like the Circles of Grace challenge, and asking where there are places that they disagree with. Even at the dinner table, I'm asking each and every day, tell me about a place where you failed today and what you learned about it. And so, like, there's a lot of, these unique things that I'm like, all right, how do I, incorporate this, even to the thing of the birthday challenge, right? And so for
Yeah.
most people, know our message is not, it's not about finding meaning in your work. It's all about bringing meaning to your work, which is based on original job crafting research by Rizanewski and Dutton in 2001. And so even with the birthday challenges for my kids, I'm saying, all right, how do you bring meaning to this year, this new year? And so it's been pretty cool seeing my son accomplish his, which was a visit to swim in the ocean. And so
Mm.
we did that both in California, Catalina Island, as well as in
Yes.
Ghana this past summer. And then my daughter's is actually launching her book. And so her first book comes out later next year. And she's 12 years old. And so I'm excited. And so
That,
those are some of the same principles that we're teaching. So yeah.
and so, what did she choose as a topic for her book?
Yeah, so she's passionate about sustainability. So her
Huh?
book is called The Day Before Earth Day. And so she's
Nice.
walking through these mythical figures that she meets. And she doesn't like the earth. She's falling asleep when they're talking about all this kind of stuff. And then um, in her dream, she's introduced to these awesome characters. And so it's really just designed to make recycling and sustainability fun for kids. And so she's designed it for like 8 to 12-year-old, but she's finished with her illustrator and her editor. And so now she's typesetting and launching likely the day before Earth Day.
Nice. Well, I'm sure you've been a big inspiration in helping her through that journey herself. Which brings us to the topic of helping our leaders that are on the call today,
Mhm.
helping our leaders understand how they can create environments that are more meaningful to their employees, so they can better attract the best talent that's out there. So, what are the things that we need to think about to really bringing or attracting those people into our organizations? What can leaders do to enable that?
Well, I'll put this in the context of um, respectful disagreement, right? Which is kind of
Hmm.
the essence. And I think there's a lot, especially in our society today. with everything from, politics to wars to the number one, the biggest social issue of all times, who's the GOAT, Michael Jordan or LeBron James. And I'm joking, but the interesting component is what we found is that leaders who are willing to, and it sounds so simple, but it's actually profound. Leaders who are willing to do two things. One, model the behavior, right?
Hmm.
Because oftentimes it's like, what do I do for this, right? Rather than what do I do for me? And as I model the behavior, it permeates through the organization because people are watching and looking at leaders. They're looking at the executives and asking, what are they actually living? How are they actually modeling this behavior? Or is this just lip service, right? It's one of those things, right? Like, here's our mission, but then it's never talked about. It's not seen in practice. It's never revisited. And it just becomes a piece of artwork in many organizations rather than something that's embodied through the mission and values of the leader. So number one is in modeling the behavior. And so even in our presentation, work and lead to a different beat. The reason it's not just lead to a different beat is because we have to model that behavior. So that's number one. Number two is this process of leading with vulnerability and sharing mistakes and places where people have messed up, or you as a leader have, hey, I was pretty negative in this disagreement in this moment, but here's one of the areas where I've learned and able to grow, because we all make mistakes and the people know that, and they're talking about us in the cafeterias, or now the virtual cafeterias for some. And the question is, are we honest and trustworthy enough to be able to admit those mistakes and to be vulnerable with our people? And so Brene Brown has really shaped that for us in many significant ways. And so those are the two things. The last I'd say, and this is really big, I said two, but I'll give you this bonus one, is the power E word. And it is not a soft skill, empathy. It is not.
Empathy.
It is a business skill, because there's been research after research that's shown that one of the top predictors of executive effectiveness in a multi-country study with over 6,000 people shown is empathy. It's one of the better predictors of executive effectiveness. And so being able to have empathy, and what I mean by empathy doesn't mean you're like, oh, I'm just so sorry you're going. Empathy is being able to see something from the other person's perspective and be able to connect and show that understanding and help them walk through and or navigate that, and or empower them to be able to navigate it. And so
Hmm.
that's the beauty of that. And that's what respectful disagreement is. It's seeing things from the other person's perspective and lens, being able to connect with them even when we disagree with them. And so when we model the behavior, we choose to be vulnerable, and we express that empathy, it allows us to operate in a great place of executive effectiveness.
Yeah, I think that's a big topic nowadays. I mean, there's, of course, everybody on the call and our audience is familiar with the division that is taking place in the United States and frankly across the globe on a lot of different topics and so forth. And so we seem to become more polarized. And I think that maybe some social media and news events have kind of put us in that place where it puts us on one side or the other, it seems. How do we work on closing that divide? What are the learnings that you're showing in your book?
Yeah. So one of the things that we dove into, a lot of research, academic journals, business books, all this kind of stuff, and we identified 5 pillars. Now, let's be very
Mm.
honest. It could be 100 pillars, right? But that would have been a
Yeah.
very long book that no one would have read. So what we did is that we took a macro approach, and we looked at and summarized which are the key pillars that we find that are able to actually help people to make progress, not to be perfect, not to have perfect organizations, but to make progress so that we're continuing to move forward. And so those
Mm.
5 pillars are simply: pillar number one is challenge your perspective. Pillar number two, be the student. Pillar number three, cultivate your curiosity. Pillar number four, seek the gray. And pillar five is agree to respect. And so I want to park, and I will stop there because I don't want to dominate the conversation, and just challenge your perspective. And pillar number one. And it's actually the last pillar we added, but we found it's the most pivotal and significant, because most conversations around disagreement, civil discourse, conflict are more reactive. It's when you're in the moment, this is what you do, right? Take 10 deep breaths or other things. But what we found was missing in a lot of the approach to disagreement is what happens before you disagree. How do you
Yeah.
prepare yourself in the first place? And that's why challenging your perspective is a pre-disagreement or pre-conflict perspective. Now, what does that mean? Challenge your perspective is where you're consistently, intentionally going and engaging in things that will challenge your perspective. I'm giving you two fronts: one as a leader
Mhm.
just for themselves, but a leader in their organization. Now, one is a Circles of Grace challenge, right? A very practical way. But let me preempt that.
Yeah.
I want to challenge this theory of open door policy. Y'all, let's executives, please, we all hear me. Cancel the open door policy. All right. And what I mean, because most of your employees already know that the door is closed when you're opening the door policy, right? But what we've been challenging leaders to do is move from an open door policy to what we call an out the door policy. Open door policy implies passivity. It's if you need me, I'm here, right? But oftentimes people don't feel that they can actually utilize that. But when we move to an out the door policy, we intentionally go and hear the stories and experiences of our people. How do we do that? Because you're saying I'm already overworked. I have a lot going on. Well, we'll give you a mathematical formula to do this. We call it 1 MC over W. 1 MC over W is simply this: one meaningful connection per week, where you build into your calendar maybe 15 to 20 minutes to intentionally go out and hear the stories of your people. Now, I heard some of you even listening to right now and watching, you're like, but Justin, oh my gosh, that's 52.14 times a year. Well, if that's the case, yes, in a leap year, flip the W upside down and make it one meaningful connection per month. The focus is progress where we're intentionally, now maybe it's a lunch, but you have to build it into your calendar where it's about, hey, I love, what brought you to our organization? What's been your journey, right? How is life, right? Like just learning and engaging with the people, we found ways that not only attract people because they feel like there's a heart-based approach to leadership, but it retains your best people because they feel valued and cared for when you're willing to intentionally not wait for them to come to you, but to go and engage with them. That's one practical way. Sorry, go ahead.
And so having a proactive approach, and so Shar, I'd love to hear about your coaching of leaders, and in your experience, have you found leaders to be very inquisitive about their employees? I mean, in your experience in your career.
Well, actually, I have seen a lot of leaders actually wishing they had more time.
Hmm.
And that's why I like Justin's point. In fact, I mentioned this yesterday on LinkedIn that, the span of control is such that some, and particularly nursing, I've had leaders with over 40 direct reports and manager meetings to get to and executive PowerPoints to present. Justin, you get what I'm talking about, and lots of busy work, and the inability to really go out and spend the time with their employees. And so I've heard this. So I think it's a lot of times a system matter and a management structure issue, not addressing span of control. So the organization, the senior leaders really need to analyze that. Also, I would say this whole discussion reminds me of when the CEO, who I don't think was a big fan of mine because I wouldn't let him just fire people every day. But this CEO finally, seriously,
Yeah.
I said, that person doesn't report to you. But anyway, he finally sat down with me at the lunch table in the cafeteria. So I thought that was nice of him to literally sit down and have a dialogue over a sandwich. I guess, Justin, I do agree with you. I think 20 minutes to me, even if you are really busy, it seems like, gosh, why can't we find 20 minutes to have a sandwich with somebody?
Yes.
So what do you think about span of control and the challenges of having the time to spend with your people and have those meaningful connections? What do you think about
Well,
that?
one, I think you're brilliant, and I love that you were able to challenge that CEO to not fire everybody. So thank you for that, because people are paying attention and they're watching, right? It's almost like the sports analogy of the coach that doesn't care about their their team members,
Well,
right?
he had his magical list of 30 people he wanted to chop off the block. He just didn't realize they report to other people, and they weren't even on a write-up. HR guy, you get it.
Yeah, it sounds like Deion Sanders at Colorado. But the interesting thing is, I think it's brilliant, because when we think about span of control and we think about the organizational structure, yes, it can be very overwhelming. And until you're able to strategically navigate and move through that, taking a process approach of maybe one lunch a month and building into your calendar and identifying that is very important. Now, for 40 direct reports, it's going to take you over 3 years.
Yeah,
But
that's the challenge.
yes, if you change or transform and empower and level out some of the organization with some of the amazing consultants that are on this call that can help you through that strategy, it helps you to have fewer direct reports to empower them to then empower the rest of your team. And that's been helpful even in our organization. Our team from Ghana, I used to be heavily influenced and engaging with, and director of operations. I just, so I'm not in any of those meetings. I touch base once a month for our care call, which has nothing to do with work, but just how everybody's doing and how I'm doing as a person. But other than that, I'm not in the day-to-day operations of those people. And so if you're able to level out, and then even a level behind that is we have one of our people leaders in Ghana who's now managing a team in Ghana, right? And so there's these levels that are, when truly empowered, are able to help. So I think you're brilliant on that.
Well, I thank you for calling me brilliant. That's very nice. I also do want to mention there are ways. I mean, we can stand at the water cooler. Most people need to drink some water during the day. We can stand by the coffee machine. I mean, we need to be more present. And it was interesting as an HR person actually coming in at night in the ER and spending people in the break room. More visibility like that means so much. But so interested in what the rest of my colleagues have to think.
So one thing that I, with leaders, I see sometimes I'm trip up on is they can jump to conclusions. And I know that you have that concept in your book, called Golden Respect. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Golden Respect challenges this norm of what we define as respect, right? And so we've identified 10 characteristics, but I'm going to spare you only talk about 3. Number 1 is the concept that respect must be earned. And we begin challenging that and saying, why? Where did this philosophy of that I have to earn respect or somebody has to earn my respect? No, we can choose to freely give it to them because every single person is worthy of value and dignity, right? That's golden respect. Golden respect is also where it's not about your title that grants you respect, right? Not just because you're the leader. It's because you're a human being. And so whether the janitor or CEO, each and every single one of those is worthy of respect. And last but not least is we've sometimes conflated honor and respect. And when we talk about that, it's like I can say something like, oh, you just lost my respect. Well, no. They may have lost your honor. You may not hold them in high esteem or a high regard because of actions, behaviors, and/or values, but each person is still worthy of respect. And so when we talk about I respectfully disagree, the concept is that respect is a choice, that respect is showing that person has value and dignity. Respect could, even when we vehemently disagree with their ideology, that we can passionately pursue their humanity. And that's what we mean when we talk about golden respect.
And so I'd love your perspective, Sumit. I mean, that sometimes when there's these so-called villains in society, the people that we hear about in the news, that we are, that we have this preconceived notion about. Do they deserve our respect? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Everyone deserves respect. Now, we may not honor them. We may not value their ideology. We may 100% vehemently disagree with their ideology. I'm going to keep coming back to that point. I can vehemently disagree with someone's ideology and yet passionately pursue their humanity. And one of the things that's been important for me is, and I tell people this is my own perspective, I don't protest. I'm okay with protests, right? I don't mind them. But I don't protest people. I may, if people choose to protest, I encourage people to protest ideology because people can change. People's perspectives can change. But when we protest people, we are now challenging this aspect of valuing the humanity. And so what does this look like? I'll give you a great kind of preemptive from the Circles of Grace, from the challenger perspective. And I encourage people to take the Circles of Grace challenge, right? It may seem simple, but the Circles of Grace challenge is really something I created because I realized I wasn't living up to my mom's ideals, right? As I shared, and when she was stationed in Japan for those 2 years and she found that some people never left base, she was like, Justin, I don't want you and your brother to be like that and never leave your home base. And so I realized many years ago, I was confining myself to my circles of comfort, people that looked like me, thought like me, believed like me, and I wasn't leaving home base to experience society. And so the Circles of Grace challenge is simply this. Every 6 months, every 6 to 12 months, I go to events, experiences, or I engage with people in either which I don't know a lot about and or I disagree with. And I only go asking 2 questions. What did I learn about this event, experiences, and our people? And what did I learn about myself as I experienced them? Now, what's fascinating is that there's many times I've walked away and said, you know what, I still disagree. But I've gotten firsthand information and I've been able to humanize people. Now, last piece of this is you can also do this as an organization. We recently took the Ford Family Foundation through this, and we did this Circles of Grace challenge, and they chose to focus it on people that they serve, right? And so people within their industries and things that they engage. And it was profound. The debrief at the end of the 6 months was amazing because they talked about things that they made assumptions about, things that they jumped to conclusions about, and things that as they talked to people, listened, went to events and experiences, even the cafeteria, great call out, Shar, they found opportunities to actually make those connections, even in ideologies that they were vehemently against.
Is there a way, because especially in the States now, it can get so heated with people in terms of political beliefs and who they're supporting, and you can go down the rabbit hole and just dig in. Each person's going to stand their ground, and you, as you said before, you can really disagree with someone, and that's not going to change. But is there a way to maybe steer the conversation to, let's talk about things that we have in common, or how do we solve problems that we have in common, versus you taking one stance and me taking the opposite?
Yeah. I love that statement, and I think we can nuance it a little bit. And what I mean by that is, say I'm having a conversation with someone. One of the things that we often want to immediately jump to, right? And we call this a double Dutch style of communication. Now, if you don't know what double Dutch is, the single rope's like this, right? Double Dutch are 2 ropes like this, and somebody's waiting to jump in like this, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what we often do when we're communicating. We're waiting to jump in, waiting to say you're wrong, or you don't know the facts. Have you seen this study? Did you read this book? Rather than what we call the power of 3, which is a practice of deep listening. And in the power of 3, one of the things we encourage people to do is lean in at least to the 3rd level of the conversation, right? So instead of immediately saying, well, I think that's a stupid idea, or how could you believe that? Why would anybody? We might ask a deeper question. Oh, like, how did you come to this understanding? When did you first believe this, right? Even if you don't know what to say, use the power of 3 words of tell me more. Yeah. Because it allows a person to deepen. Now, only then do I feel like we can actually engage with the process of understanding, right? Because now I know what they mean, right? Where they're coming from, what's the context that they mean. That's why I love, to give you a great example, I love when people tell me, it's like, Justin, we don't value diversity and inclusion. I love when I hear that statement. And the reason I love it is because my first question, instead of, oh, how could you not value diversity and inclusion? Studies have shown, business case, da-da-da. No. I don't even go that route. How do you define diversity and inclusion? Because it gives me an insight on how people are approaching it. Because oftentimes I'm realizing we're talking about 2 different concepts. I'm talking about every single person and valuing them, no matter what they believe, where they come from. And they're talking about very specific, maybe social ideals at times. And so those are the opportunities when we listen deeply that we can then connect to seek the gray. And that's the common understanding.
The gray area is the common understanding, to find that middle ground. Is there often a middle ground, or is it kind of weighted to one side? I mean, I know that there's ways for us to come to an understanding in a negotiation, but should we always seek for that middle ground in an argument?
Yeah. So one, if you would allow me to kind of nuance that statement. I don't think it's middle ground, because middle implies this equality or equal here. but I do like common ground. I do
Mhm.
like common ground. Where are those places, to Howard's point, that we have in common? So one of the things we sometimes hear in terms of, say, we're talking about gun rights or gun control, right? Maybe instead of talking about, oh my gosh, I think, how could you do? Maybe the first step leading into that is, wow, one of the things that I'm hearing you say, and I appreciate about both of us, is that we really care about the safety of our families. That's a way to enter into that conversation in a much more meaningful, common ground way, that even if you still end up disagreeing on the outcomes and what it looks like, that you're able to engage. Now, there's a whole great research on this called conversational receptiveness. And it talks about these 4 things that are helpful for that. And one of those 4 things is hedging your claims. And then when you hedge your claims, instead of speaking in absolutes, or this never happens, or it may be something, Sam, I really appreciate your point about X. One of the things I found from my perspective is that small hedging of claim of my perspective, the way I approach this, the way I engage this, what I have seen is one of those things that allows people to actually want to have more conversations, even when you disagree.
Yeah. But sometimes, when you're trying to have a good conversation with a person, it turns into a sparring match. And sometimes they take it to an extreme. Like, says, well, you're trying to have a balanced conversation, and they go, well, what if this happens? What is how do you pull that back in line to where you can have that more beneficial conversation where you're finding that common ground?
Yeah, I love that you brought this point up because often when a sparring match happens, guess what happens to our ego? And now we're in defense mode. And so we talk about what we call the 3 selves. And the 3 selves are simply this. So you have superior self, where you are better than. And when you're in those sparring matches, you start edging up towards superior self, right? You have inferior self, where you might feel like you're less than for a myriad of different reasons. But what we encourage people to do is practice what we call equal self. Now, this is going to sound unique, but it's actually been proven to work. So even in moments where I'm operating, and while writing this book, let me be very clear. On my writing retreat of writing, I respectfully disagree. I disrespectfully disagreed with someone. So what I'm not saying is that this equals perfection. But I noticed as I was having a conversation with one of my fellow colleagues, I started operating from superior self because he threw away food. And when he threw away food, as a person who grew up without a lot of money and we didn't have the luxury to throw away food, I started making a lot of assumptions. So, do you not value? And then I asked, do you let your kids throw away food? And oh my gosh, now I'm attacking his parenting. And I realized how defensive he was getting in that moment, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, Justin, I realized I just operated from superior self because it was something that was of value to me.
Right.
And I stepped back and I asked this question to myself, third person in my head. I didn't ask it out loud. I said, Justin, what would equal self Justin do? Now, you may say, oh, why would you need to do that? Well, there's actually some psychological benefits to that. And I may be messing up the term, but I think it's some aspect of cognitive dissonance, where you separate yourself and ask the question of third person, how would I approach this if? Or how would Justin or how would Shar approach this? And it allows you to operate just a little bit distance from the emotion of it to be able to have a much more meaningful thing. And so when I asked that, I said, well, equal self Justin would have listened more, would have asked more questions. And so I went back to my colleague, apologized, and I said, hey, I realized I was operating a little bit of superior self there. And I'd love to hear kind of like, how did you grow up with food? And it actually turned into a good conversation that he was like, well, I may challenge how I parent a little bit differently, but before he was defending it. Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, in that context, I want to make some space for Smit. Being around the world, there's a little bit of a delay in being able to speak. But Smit, I mean, talking about style or styles, there's some leaders out there that go straight. And I'm kind of, Justin, I'm kind of bringing that tortoise principle I want to dive into. But some leaders go in there and they're trying to jump straight to a point where there may be a more strategic element. What do you see as far as leadership in different styles and as it relates to success and connection with people?
That's an interesting question, actually. Um, I think in this part of the world, it's fairly common for leaders to try and include people, and expect what Justin calls respectful agreement. So it's kind of the done thing, but I think it's very difficult to distinguish between disrespectful agreement and respectful agreement because of the point you're making about respect and honor. So
Yeah.
um, we, at least in Asia, that's what I observe a lot, that people can be respectful without really honoring you, and therefore as a leader, if you're not having those water cooler conversations that Shar spoke of, you would never really figure whether they're agreeing with you respectfully or disrespectfully, and you might just be happy that I've got agreement, that's what it takes, and move on. So I think that's one of the interesting challenges that leaders in this part of the world have to solve for.
Can I speak to that? Because Submit, like, oh my gosh, yes. I love that. One of the things that we've actually, our term for that, because initially we were just trying to solve disrespectful disagreement. And we were trying to, how do we make disrespectful disagreement into respectful disagreement? But we realized there's a whole different category that you're speaking of called disrespectful agreement. And what do I mean by that, right? It's on two different fronts. Disrespectful agreement could be the person that I may be talking to Howard. I'm like, Howard, that's a really good idea. I loved your point. But then, talking to Shar at the water cooler, I'm like, what was Howard thinking? I think that was the most stupid idea ever. Right. So I am doing what young people may call gaslighting, or I'm saying one thing in front of your face, but behind closed doors, I'm actually disrespecting you because I agree with you in a moment. But it could be on the other side of that. And you might have grown up, whether growing up as a child and you were told things like children should be seen and not heard, or you grew up in a culture where there was a high deference for those in authority, right? Like Ghana. As a Ghanaian American, that's one of the things that's really big for me. And so people, and I'm constantly challenging my team, because my team is like, oh, okay, yes. Also, they sometimes a joke around, yes, boss, yes, boss. I'm like, no. It's like they'll say yes, even if they don't understand, they'll say yes and agree because the deference of authority. So what I've had to do, and I encourage leaders, no matter where you live, is to do three things. Number one is to make this statement. I would like for you all to disagree with me and help us to make something better. Now, the statement by itself will do nothing. But I've noticed as I've said that, the second thing that we do is when it's happening, to call it out in a positive way. Oh, Sam, thank you so much for that. It actually led me to a better point that I didn't have before. People are paying attention, and what's reinforced is meaningful. And last but not least, right, and I love the ADKAR change management model, and R, the reinforcement, is rewarding your employees or your team for disagreement. Now, what I mean by reward, I'm not talking about compensation or it's on their 360. What I mean by rewarding is at the end of the meeting, when you've made a decision to come back, whether it's email or the next meeting, and say, hey, you know what? One of the things I really want to appreciate is that I appreciate Howard for bringing a perspective that was different than mine and disagreeing with me, because it actually helped us to come to this solution that is a far better solution. And when the results are seen, to come back to that. Those are opportunities that you can start crafting in that culture where people feel like they don't have to disrespectfully agree, but that they can actually respectfully disagree because you've asked for it and you've created a better culture that has more progress in that area.
Well, this is what I want to mention. I definitely appreciate it's about the cultural aspects. In one of the hospitals I worked at, the service excellence department put a little mirror in front of your phone with the smiley face in the front. so that when you're on the phone, you're smiling when you're talking to people, even though they're screaming about the job classification codes that they have to input into the form. And you're like, yes, Mr. Jones, you do need to put the job classification number on your phone. Don't scream at my HR assistant. So also, as I was doing my sociology study this morning, watching Netflix, watching Outlast, which is a survivor show, which is what I love about this. The four, no offense, gentlemen, the four men, the big hurly men from Texas, 6'3" with the big muscles, they immediately ran for the axes. There were 4 axes, and they got to run and pick up the axe. And that meant that they were now the leader of the group, and they got to pick the rest of their group. And the one little lady was the last one picked. And everybody's like, well, he's got the axe. So, and he's picking the group. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to keep my mouth shut, even though we need food, water, kill the squirrel. You know, we need to build some shelter. And I know how to hunt, but he doesn't. He just wants to run around with his axe. Anyway, the point is that it all starts at the beginning. It starts with the time that you hire the employee. You're going to have alpha people, not males, people who immediately are going to take charge, particularly with new hires and particularly with team development and supporting one another. And I've been there. You're afraid to say anything because you're going to get hit with the axe. And if you're not going to get hit with the axe in the real sense, it's oftentimes the nonverbal, the bureaucracy, the political aspects, and those things that happen behind your back that, you know, if you speak up, ultimately retaliation is going to happen.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think it needs to be an expectation in the work. Now I'm going to the workforce, not on an island in Alaska, but I would say it definitely needs to be part of that culture and openly talking about it and calling it out as a performance issue. Yes, this can be a performance issue. We have people bullying others, not allowing others to speak, and like I'm doing right now. I'm talking too much, but Sam calls me out, says, "Shar, you're talking too much." But you know, but yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, I agree with you, Justin. How do we keep this in a cultural aspect and make it a performance matter? People are taking over too much of other people in conversations.
Yeah. To your point, and I love that perspective, like it is a performance issue. Because if I feel like I'm constantly guarding what I'm saying, if I feel like I'm constantly holding back, walking on eggshells, it's going to impact innovation, creativity, new ideas. And so let's take it to that step of performance, right? Of, you know, asking the questions and potentially providing it in people's evaluations about, are you able to disagree or not with your leader? How comfortable are you with doing that, right? In a respectful way. I work with one organization, which I will not name, and they suffered from toxic positivity. And what do I mean by that is, so it was everything's good, everything's happy, because the leader was all about things are good, you make it what you want it to be, all these kind of things. You gotta focus on things that are really good. And so, you know, I'm seeing this and I'm in the meetings, right? And I'm working through this with them. And then as I'm having these one-on-ones with people, I notice them start to actually go against what I'm seeing globally. But in those micro conversations, it wasn't as positive as it was made to seem. And I think what was happening is a leader unintentionally was creating an environment where everybody felt like they couldn't say anything bad. They couldn't say anything negative because it would harm the reputation of the leader and or the organization, rather than being the leader creating a space where people could be open and honest in productive ways, not just being negative because they just want to, you know, throw down negativity. And because they failed to do that, one of the things that they continue to operate in, even in some of the work that we did, was toxic positivity. And the leader needed to see that, because everyone looked to that leader of asking, can I actually be honest? And this is what people do. We may go to a workshop, we may hear on the People Strategy Forum about creating these atmospheres, honesty, and having all these things. And then when somebody tries it, and so being very mindful that we're encouraging that. And even when somebody gives us feedback, or if somebody gives us that honesty or disagrees with us, even if we completely disagree with what they're saying, thank them. right? It comes back to pillar 5, agree to respect. Let's stop saying let's agree to disagree, because many people do that very dismissively and very disrespectfully. But when we agree to respect, we leave people fully acknowledged. And I love Zhang Zhao, Stanford professor. She had this statement called "Thank you because," research-based, that when we practice "Thank you because," it allows people to feel valued, even if we don't decide to go in that route. Let me give you 3 options. Howard, thank you because, in having this conversation, you taught me something new that I never knew before. Smith, thank you because, wow, like, you mentioned 3 things, and number 2 really stood out that I think I'm going to dive in deeper and learn a little bit more about. Or Shar, wow, this was a tough conversation, and I want to say thank you, and I really appreciate you leaning into this conversation because you didn't have to. Now, not once did I say I agree with you. Not once did I say what you said was the best thing ever. But in all of those examples, I'm acknowledging you, and I'm acknowledging your journey, and you take it a step further when I can thank you and show I have understanding of how you got there. Those are things meaningful leaders can do to make an impact within their organizations and in their conversations.
Yeah, I often find that's one of the main things that people are looking for is just a little bit of a grace or acknowledgement of their thoughts. What do you think, Smit?
So, on a slightly funny note, this was reminding me of there's that popular meme about what British people say and what they actually mean. So, how does one prevent that kind of misinterpretation where somebody's saying, "Oh, that's a very interesting idea." So you interpret that as he
It's
finds
rubbish.
my idea interesting, but the actual interpretation in British terms is this is nonsense and absolute rubbish. So how does one guard against that?
I think leaders need to be real. Some I've been in organizations where they tried to force this, with having like the one level skip management lunches, and people are saying, "Oh my God, I have to go to this," and they're going to ask me to share, and it felt forced. And then nothing really happened anyway. And so then people just sort of say, "Why are you bothering?" So there has to be a reality, and there has to be some impact.
100%. And the reality and impact that we want to very focus on is it comes back to one of my favorite books growing up. All right. The Tortoise and the Hare. Powerful book. We send all of our clients this book because in the tortoise, for those that don't know that fable, there's a rabbit and a hare. Rabbit and a tortoise, and they're about to race, and they go and race, and the rabbit is overconfident, thinks they have it all together. They race off, and the rabbit's like, "Oh, I'm good. I'm faster than this turtle anyway, right? So I'll go and relax." Goes, takes a nap, wakes up, realizing the tortoise has already crossed the finish line. It was crossing the finish line. It was too late. Now, the moral of the story is we called, slow and steady wins the race. Now, I've been arguing for years that we've been calling the tortoise the wrong name. The tortoise wasn't slow. The tortoise was strategic. We only called the tortoise slow because we compared the tortoise to the hare. And when we operate in a place in our organizations from a tortoise approach, that we're building sustainable, long-lasting foundations that are able to consistently build, we'll see real, long-lasting impact. When we take the hare approach, which many organizations are taking today, it's the quick fixes, it's the quick moments. I tried this one initiative and we didn't operate from a change management framework, and we see it fail, then we say, "Oh, it didn't work anyway," right? Imagine you went to a workshop for your significant other, and they to share some feedback about what they did well. You try it one day, like, "Oh, didn't work." They still yelled at me for not washing the dishes. We can't take that same approach in our organizations. That, "Oh, it didn't work." So when we take the strategic and consistent approach, because we realize the why behind it is powerful, that it attracts better employees, it retains the best employees. Those are the things that will drive consistent and long-term impact over those short-term hare moments that we see.
That's some a great insight. I love that piece that you talk about in your book, and a lot of the discussions that you've been having online lately on that concept. So thank you, Justin. So as we are coming to the end of our time here, what are some of the top things that you want our leaders that are listening in to think about in the near future?
Yeah. One is to take the Circles of Grace challenge. I encourage you to consider doing this personally. All right. It's a great opportunity, a way that you can model the behavior of going to experiences, events, and/or talking, engage with people that you know a lot about. I was talking with one, just did some work with Adidas headquarters, and one of their senior HR people has shared that they initially just joined an employee resource group that had absolutely nothing to do with them and just went to learn and experience. And they were so appreciative of this person being there and being a part of this for 2 years that senior HR executive ended up becoming one of their executive sponsors. And so that's one thing. And just in challenging our perspective, we end up creating these connections with people that would be unexpected. So number one, challenge your perspective. Number two is really consider taking that out the door policy. Maybe just once a month, and build it into your calendar and make it sacred time, because your people are worth it. And how you engage the people, whether formally and or at the water cooler, shared, is very important. And last but not least is how you craft this within your organization matters. It's not going to happen overnight, but some of the best organizations that we've seen create this, they've modeled that behavior in front of people. They've had two key executives talk about something that they disagreed on, and they showed it in a company-wide forum in a respectful manner, right? That they were able to walk through. And so why is that important to your division, right? And able to ask questions and engage. That modeling behavior taught all the other people who are under them or reported to them that this is okay. And this is actually the expectation of what we want in our culture. And last but not least is just don't leave this for work. Choose to do this outside of work. All right. As a former HR professional, we used to tell people leave work at work and home at home. And you and I and everyone listening knows that doesn't work. And our employees and team members knows that doesn't work. So what will you do even outside of it? Because it's about practicing and building up the muscles. You don't go to the gym on January 2nd and expect to be fit all of a sudden, but it's the consistent going back that allows us to have a meaningful impact.
Great. Thank you. One final question, Justin. Where do you get those cool suits? Are those all custom made?
Yeah. Yes. I get these done in Ghana. And it's actually, I'm not going to go into the long story of it, but this came from respectful disagreement. I was going to go confront my dad for not being in my life in Ghana in 2019. And I have a great therapist who I still have. So please, y'all, get therapy. It's very helpful. Not just because things are wrong, even though my kids would say something different, but to keep things going right. And my Leadership Charlotte cohort. And they helped me to transform what I was going to take as a confrontation into a conversation. And as I chose to hear my dad's story, as I chose to seek the gray, as I chose to be a student, cultivate curiosity, and agree to respect, it led me to choose to forgive my dad. And as I forgave him, what I didn't realize on the other side of that was a whole aspect of my heritage that I had been holding back. Because my dad was from Ghana, my mom's from America. That makes me African-American. You may get that joke later. But the interesting thing is in all of that, just that moment of hearing my dad's story and respectfully disagreeing allowed me to embrace an aspect of my heritage that I didn't know I was missing.
Yeah. That's some of the important work that you're doing can help those connections across hundreds, if not thousands of people. So thank you for the important research and the effort of bringing this message to our listeners. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you. And thank you, brilliant minds, for asking really great questions and being a resource for so many people.
So for our leaders that want to learn more and go beyond your book, I mean, what the steps should they take there?
Yeah, so 3 places. One, the easiest is howtorespectfullydisagree.com, where we're adding new things there all the time. Our respectful disagreement quotient is coming out. And actually, even our 14-module micro-learning self-paced course is coming out just to help people lean into that. Workmeaningful.com, is where our umbrella organization, where we're helping organizations and professionals become more meaningful. And I love LinkedIn. And so connect with me on LinkedIn, Justin Jones-Fosu. You don't even have to send me a direct note. Don't feel pressured to do that. But I do love connecting on there and learning from you in the process. So those 3 places.
Nice. Well, it's been a true pleasure. Thank you so much, Justin, for your time today.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thanks, Justin.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. So see everybody else next week on the People Strategy Forum.